Awareness is power.
And it could save your life.
Welcome to our podcast, No Risks.
I'm Heather.
And I'm Lee. We're two moms, a lawyer and a nurse, who were brought together by a misfortune. Both our children were harmed by adverse drug reactions.
The purpose of this podcast is to educate people on the risk of any health treatments you put in or on your body.
We feel if we'd been properly informed and been our own experts, our children would not have been harmed.
In today's world, with medicines being incentivized for profits, you need to educate yourself. Know the risk of health treatments, and it can protect yourself and your loved ones from being harmed. After a severe reaction to fluoroquinolones and macrobid, Dana Wald is now fighting to rebuild her body and her life after spending 4 years bedridden.
I was constantly in a coma-like state on the couch. I experienced extreme weight loss. I lost 20 pounds within a matter of weeks.
Before Ferdinand Dersch, or Ferdi, got sick, he loved going to concerts, skiing, and spending time in nature. After he had finished school in Germany, he was prescribed moxifloxacin for sinusitis and developed a full range of serious and life-limiting side effects.
I had electricity running through my body and I had chest pain. I had panic attacks. I had severe panic attacks and paranoia.
Their story, which we will hear in just a few moments, is one of tragedy and hope, and is a testament to the flawed health system in the U.S. and in Europe. So thank you for tuning in with us today. We hope that you get as much out of this conversation as Lee and I did. All right, we are so pleased to have two guests with us today to share their story. Dana and Ferdi. Saying that correctly,
yeah,
right?
Perfect.
I'll get it right. They're joining us today from Germany. Really interesting story behind this. Although they're in Germany today with us, Dana's mother, who was a true advocate for her, Lori, a couple years ago, I believe she emailed a reporter who did a story about what had happened to Shay and his horrific experience with fluoroquinolones, in his case, Levaquin. And I got this email, and she said she was in the neighboring town. We're in a small community, that she was right next door, but she had taken her daughter, Dana, to a doctor in California for issues from the effects of the fluoroquinolone she took, and we'll talk about that today. But this doctor in California had actually told her to get in touch with me. I don't know him personally, but I think he uses some materials that I've generated on his website and in his literature, which is what this is all about, spreading the word and having a support community to reach out to, so that when your intuition, or as we've been calling it, hunch, is that you might have had an adverse effect, in this case to a fluoroquinolone, that you can be validated, because it's so difficult. And we're going to hear a lot of these stories, but when you're not getting that type of validation from your healthcare provider, sometimes even from families or others around you, it can be very difficult and really add to the stress and just the horrific experience of having a toxic reaction, especially to these drugs, which, in my case, these drugs were the drugs that, proved fatal for my son, and for Lee's daughter, put her on just years of dealing with the effects of taking them. So we're so happy to have you two here today. I've never got to talk to Dana. I've always talked to your mother, but we've grown a friendship over the past couple of years, and a lot of the topic is about you. How about Ferdi?
Yes.
We're just really excited today to hear your story. So I guess I'll just, let one of you start. I don't, I know what I've heard from your mother. But would just love to hear it in your own words. And Ferdi, I know how you two met, and you've experienced these horrific effects too. So we just want to hear from you both. So
Okay. I guess it's hard to explain where mine starts because I have taken fluoroquinolones on and off since I was 12. I was first prescribed Levaquin at 12 years old, which I took that twice, and then I've taken Cipro at least 5 to 6 times throughout my life. And I had never connected the dots at the time that some of the issues I was having, in my late teens, early 20s could be related to taking these drugs. It was nothing that affected my life at the time. I was just having some worsening digestive issues, reactive hypoglycemic issues. I started getting chronic stiff necks in my 20s, which just seemed like something I shouldn't be experiencing at that age. Muscle twitching and some worsening anxiety and panic attacks that I was experiencing. But I was still very active. I never connected it to taking those at the time. I was a performing musician in Chicago. I was working out, 4 to 5 times a week. Sometimes I had my own dog walking company and I lived in an apartment in Chicago. And then in December 23rd of 2017, I had a UTI, urinary tract infection, and I went into a CVS Minute Clinic, which was just a couple days before Christmas. I wanted to be feeling better for Christmas, and she prescribed me Macrobid, nitrofurantoin, it's also called. And this, what I later learned, was basically just the nail in the coffin for me. I reached my tolerance threshold by taking fluoroquinolones so often for so many years. And then within a day of taking Macrobid, I started noticing some very strange effects happening. I was having chills very bad. I started developing extreme night sweats. I had very bad digestive distress, and then I started getting extreme bouts of vertigo. And I'm not talking like you feel a little dizzy. I'm talking about you feel like you've been on a spinning carnival ride for a half hour straight that would just come out of nowhere when I would just be standing or sitting. And I had never experienced anything like that in my entire life. I started getting rashing on my face, and then a couple nights before New Year's Eve, I was driving to a concert that my band was playing in Chicago. And I started seeing spots just when I was looking at the stoplight when I was waiting for it to change. It was very disturbing. It was almost like flashes of light, and then I'd see spots everywhere. And then I noticed it when I was on stage. I was seeing them everywhere. I can't even really describe what it was like. And then at this point, I knew that something was seriously wrong. And I went online and started searching for side effects of Macrobid. And what I was reading was extremely disturbing. And it sounded very similar to what I had going on. But then I also started reading things about lung scarring, that it can cause respiratory failure. So that was very scary for me to see. And that's when I stumbled across the FQ toxicity, where I started seeing images and videos of people in wheelchairs losing their ability to walk. And I was just like, what am I reading? Like, this is caused from antibiotics. I've never heard of this. I've been taking this my entire life on and off. So that was so terrifying to see. And then I immediately stopped taking it, hoping within a couple days that it would just resolve, since I thought if I stopped it, then it just wouldn't continue getting worse. But it just kept getting worse from there. A week later, I was running on the treadmill at the gym, and I all of a sudden started to feel sharp pains in both of my shins, and it felt like somebody was taking a sledgehammer to both of my legs. I immediately had to stop running. I felt like I was going to collapse. I couldn't make it back to the locker room, barely to my car. And then a couple days after that, I was driving my car in the city, and I all of a sudden lost feeling in my arms and my legs while I was driving on the expressway. I had to pull over. I immediately took my phone and called my mom. I was completely panicking. I didn't know what was happening. It felt like I couldn't feel my entire body. My mom rushed to Chicago, and she took me to urgent care where I, of course, presented what I had found with the side effects and said I recently took it. And they said there's absolutely no way that it can cause this since you discontinued the drug. It has nothing to do with it. They ran all these tests. They said my blood work was completely normal and that there was nothing they could do. And then after that is when it just started continuing to get worse. I noticed I could no longer stay awake during the day. I was constantly in a coma-like state on the couch. I started experiencing hallucinations, extreme psychosis and paranoia, just nonstop overwhelming fear, extreme digestive distress, like somebody had lit my intestines on fire is the only way I can describe it. I experienced extreme weight loss. I lost 20 pounds within a matter of weeks. My skin was burning. It felt like I was being burned alive, or like someone was clawing at my skin with constant pins and needles feeling all over my body. I lost all strength in my arms. And then I slowly over the months just lost all of my physical ability altogether. I had to quit my job. I could no longer drive. I had to move back in with my parents. I eventually was taking less and less steps. I just could no longer walk at one certain point, walk distances. I couldn't hold my arms up to take a shower.
During this time frame, were you seeing doctors? It just sounds so much like my son's story. I mean, just identical, in terms of the trajectory of what you're experiencing.
There really is, just when you hear everyone's story, there's so many similarities just in what happened. I mean, even his. And I was going to a functional doctor I started going to in March. He had no idea about fluoroquinolone toxicity, but he was doing everything in his power to try to help me. I was taking so many supplements, but just nothing was getting better. It just kept worsening. And my sister was getting married at that point, and I missed out on all of that. I couldn't be a part of any of her stuff. And then I just barely made it to her wedding. I was able to go to her wedding in May of 2018. But then after that, I started experiencing extreme breathing issues. And that's when it got to the point where my family said, we need to go get some serious help for this. And then they started driving me to different places all over the country. I still have, and I had extreme respiratory muscle weakness, which kept weakening, making it harder to breathe. I could no longer sing. And that's when we started just going to different places, and I had several treatments to have that done. And then when we got back from getting treatments, the issues just kept getting worse. And that's when I ended up going to the ER 2 different times. I failed the pulmonary function test at 2 different hospitals. They said I had severe restricted breathing and generalized weakness, but they had absolutely no explanation as to why. They held me at a hospital in Chicago. And then, of course, when they asked me what was going on, I always brought up, I always knew it was from taking that. I didn't know it wasn't nothing else. They thought maybe I was having a myasthenia gravis crisis. They thought I had Lyme disease, but nothing ever showed on the test. And then they started to send in the entire psych team of 5 or 6 people that were questioning why I thought this could still be from the drug when it had been, 10, 11 months at that point since I took it.
Isn't that interesting too, that's the intervention when a patient is consistent with what they believe caused them to be, feeling the way they are, is that it's an immediate entry into the mental health system.
Yes. And it was, they had 5 or 6 people come in. I was laying in the hospital bed. They were all standing around me. And they made me feel like I was just imagining all of it. They made my entire family feel like that.
Yeah, that's so hard.
And just not even, just even if you don't necessarily know what it is, not even taking the time to even, because it's all there if you look it up online or just look into it. There's so many people that this is happening to, but just even the unwillingness to even acknowledge it or talk about it. It's just,
Mhm.
you know,
You're suffering so much, and then to not be heard, and somebody to take the time. And there was at that time, 2017, when you started to piece it together, and good for you for doing that. There was literature that supported that the reaction is often delayed, and it continues long after you've stopped the medication. But that was my experience too, is that the doctors don't look at that, and the first thing they do jump to, like Heather said and like you said, is maybe there's something wrong with her. Why is she thinking this? And it's so hard.
It's all
it
in your mind.
is.
Yeah.
And then, that's one of the hardest parts of this entire thing. And after that, as sick as I felt, and every day I felt like I wasn't going to make it another day, I just didn't even want to go to the hospitals anymore. And then in December of 2018, that was the last time I sought any sort of treatment, because there was just nothing anybody was offering or acknowledging, besides the couple doctors I did see that have treated patients successfully. But after that
With this
point,
issue?
yes.
Okay.
But after that point, it was December of 2018, I became completely bedridden. I could no longer leave the house. I was in bed every day. I laid down to eat. I could barely eat and only tolerate just a couple of foods. I got down to 89 pounds. I had a bedside toilet. I couldn't make it 20 feet to get to the bed. My mom and dad had to wash my hair with a device laying down on the bed. I couldn't have any visitors. I had extreme sound and light sensitivity. Even people talking in the same room was too much stimulation for me.
Mhm.
It continued with the psychosis, delirium, hallucinations. I started to get derealization and depersonalization, where I didn't even recognize myself. I
Mhm.
felt like I was hovering over my own body, just looking down at myself. I felt completely detached from my own body. I had shakes, tremors, electrical zaps. And my dad was working to support us, and my mom was my full-time 24-hour caregiver, and she signed over to be my power of attorney, because everybody was frightened. We didn't know what was going to happen. And yeah, I never would have got through it if it wasn't for my family. So
Yeah, she saved your life.
she
She
did.
certainly did, because I don't know if you had an opportunity to look at, what happened in my family, but unfortunately, Shay did go into the mental health system, which is so interesting. And since then, and for those listening, really recommend Dr. Healy's podcast. But it's so interesting to me because we think about mental health, and it was really scary for our family when he started, like you said, you were hallucinating, anxiety, um, close to what we can, label delirium. But when someone hallucinates, generally the issue is they're having a drug reaction, or they have a very high fever. That needs to be looked at, because that hallucinations generally are not mental health issues. You might get, paranoid or delusional, but when you're actually seeing things, and this is something that doctors should know, but instead, um, the reaction from doctors is either bipolar, schizophrenia, bipolar in my son's case, which didn't make sense at all. Um, and another cocktail of drugs that just adds to the toxicity that you're already experiencing. I'm just curious too, just to go back a bit. So you were 12 when you first received, was that Levaquin?
Yeah.
See, that's just amazing to me, you know?
Honestly, he said that yesterday. He's like, it should be. It's a
That is off
crime.
label
It's a
for
crime.
Yeah.
children. Lee's daughter got it at 13.
And it's the weirdest thing, because I just look back at every time I took these now, it makes so much sense. I just remember when I was 12 taking that, and it's like I remember laying in the basement, and my arms like felt super heavy, and I just felt like a paranoia, just the weirdest thing. And it's like, you think, okay, maybe I have a high fever, it's from being sick, but you're also 12 years old. So you're like, I don't know what's going on. And you don't think it's from a drug that your doctor gave you within 10 minutes of being there when you're 12 years old. It's crazy. But now that I've know what I know and everything I've learned, I can look back and see all of these things, right in front of my eyes, what happened every time I took it.
And your mother, I mean, just to put this out there, this isn't, a family. Your mother was a nurse, correct?
She was an X-ray technician.
Okay.
Yeah, but she worked
She
at the
worked
hospital.
at the hospital. Yeah, I do
Yeah,
remember that.
for several years, and she had never heard of this
Yeah, but
either.
we've always been told, or you respect the doctor's opinion, and if the doctor tells you need an antibiotic and they prescribe one, you're not only that, you're going to a pharmacy, then it's being dispensed, so you're assuming it's safe.
Yeah. And you don't think something, that's handed out so freely and so easily like that could be something that could cause that type of catastrophic thing. It's just, and there's so many more mild, even antibiotics or natural alternatives that are just never even talked about.
Yeah. And I don't know if you, have heard about informed consent, but I know for both Heather's son and my daughter Charlie, had we been told the side effects, our kids wouldn't have taken that medication. And I'm assuming if your mother or you at the time, probably not you at that age, it would have been your mother, but had there been a list of side effects read, it would have been, what else is available?
Yeah,
What are
but
the alternatives?
and this is a young woman who's getting this drug though from age 12 to when did you start having feeling these effects?
Well, I always, I had issues on and off just growing up for things that I'm realizing now was not a normal way to feel when you were growing up. And I didn't know any differently because that's just how it was. And I thought, oh, everybody must feel this crappy all the time. I had no idea. But it's like when you take those on and off, and every time you take an antibiotic, it alters your gut microbiome and it causes these symptoms. And it was never anything that I said, oh, this could be from this drug. But then, once I took that in December of 2017, that was just like the tolerance threshold for my body.
Yeah.
When you were going through your journey after you made that connection, and you did go to the emergency, you said a couple times, were they trying to put more medication on, or was it just like, we can't help you at all, or what was the advice?
They did. I mean, they only suggested antidepressants or anti-anxieties. That was it. There was no, I'm like, okay, I get it. You think I have mental health issues. But what about my restricted breathing? It's not a normal thing for a 29-year-old to be experiencing. Like, why would I not have proper use of my lung muscles? It doesn't make it, which seems to be a neuromuscular issue caused by these drugs, I'm realizing, but they didn't offer anything other than that.
Wow. Yeah, I know in my daughter's case, it was they wanted steroids. It was anti-inflammatories because of the joint pain. But I know that was one of the things that we declined, luckily. But I know that quite a few people that did get those that came out in that European advisory meeting that they had, a lot of people that took those almost got worse right after.
Did they almost try to give you?
Yeah, I experienced it too, where they wanted to give me steroids, where I was at the hospital for an allergic reaction that I never had before. And they wanted to give me steroids too, and I was telling them that I can't take them because I was experiencing the side effects from that antibiotic that I had taken a couple months ago. And they were super dismissive of that too, and were saying like, I can promise you that can't be from it. It's such a long time ago.
Yeah, let's hear some of your story.
Yeah. So growing up, I always had a lot of infections, especially tonsil infections and ear infections. And I was given antibiotics at least, I would say five to 10 times in my life before I ended up taking the fluoroquinolone. And that happened in 2018, and that was the year I just finished school, and I spent the summer and the whole year pretty much working different jobs to earn some money. And then in December of 2018, I got this sinus infection, and I started to feel sick, and I started not feeling good. So I went to my ENT doctor, and he prescribed me moxifloxacin, Avelox, I think they also call it, 400 milligrams for 1 week, once a day. And given the fact that I had taken antibiotics before and I never experienced anything from them, I wasn't feeling too weird about it. And I was happy that he prescribed me something so I could feel better because I was feeling sick. And so I went to the pharmacy, got the antibiotic, and I also got some probiotics because at the time that was all that I knew about antibiotic side effects, that it might alter your gut bacteria and give you digestive distress. So I took the probiotics and took them with the antibiotic, and that made me feel good about it because I thought, okay, now I'm fine. I'm just taking the antibiotic, and then the infection is getting better, and then it should be okay. That's all all I was aware of. One thing I remember that was a little strange to me, my doctor, as he was prescribing the antibiotic to me, he was asking me if I would still be growing. At the time I was 20 years old, so I said, no, I stopped growing a couple of years ago. And I asked him why he was asking that, and he said there's a couple studies out where they found that I think it was from dogs, actually, from some animals that were still growing. They had some cartilage damage and the joints weren't growing properly. And at the time, that made me feel super weird, and I didn't know what to think of that. But since I wasn't growing anymore, I thought I would be totally fine. So my doctor asked me about that, and I thought it would be okay. And then I started taking the first pill the same day, and after it only took 1 hour, and then I felt like a very, very deep depression, and I felt like I never had felt in my life before. I felt so out of it, and had such a dark feeling, and felt extremely unwell. And I was super spaced out and didn't even make the connection with the antibiotic at all. That's how bad I was feeling. I couldn't even realize what was going on. Later that day, I still somehow made it to a Christmas market with my friends, and we all hung out there together, and I experienced I remember some very extreme mood swings where I would feel fine one moment, and then the next moment, even though I was in a very cool setting, just hanging out with my friends and having a good time, that feeling would come up again, and I would feel that dark depression and like the super weird feeling that I had never felt before. So that was something that I had never ever felt in my life, and I think my parents were kind of realizing it, but then at the same time you also always hear that you have to finish taking an antibiotic so you don't create any resistance to bacteria.
Yes.
And the next couple of days we drove to Amsterdam because that's where we wanted to spend our Christmas holidays. And I just kept taking the pills, and that was the only thing that I had going on at the time. But then after, I think, the fourth or the fifth pill, and I started taking them after the fifth pill, I got more side effects. Like I could tell my tendons were starting to feel stiff and shortened, and they were hurting. I felt extreme vertigo. My neck was hurting and was very painful, and I couldn't eat at all. I had extreme stomach pain. And that got to a point where I couldn't get out of bed at the hotel in Amsterdam, and my parents were totally worried about what was going on, and they decided to call this medical hotline because all of my doctors were out of office because it was Christmas. They called this medical hotline, and they were suggesting I should immediately go to the hospital and have myself checked in there, so doctors should look at me because of the side effects that could be possible from taking moxifloxacin. So we drove home, and I went to the hospital here in Germany, and I started telling the story, feeling terrible. And the doctor didn't do any tests on me. He didn't take blood. He did nothing. He just said that he thinks it's just a matter of a couple of days or weeks until it should go away. He didn't say it was impossible that that's what caused it, because I think at the time, I just had taken it 3 days ago or a week ago. And then they still said, just wait a little bit. And then since you stop taking it, it should get better. I remember asking him, because it was the winter, can I still go skiing later that winter? Because I had no idea at the time, either that it would be a thing that would take such a long time in order to start resolving. And even then I felt like, okay, in a couple of weeks, this might be totally better. But unfortunately, it got worse. It got a lot worse the next couple of months. And I developed a lot of symptoms. I think I looked at the list that I, kept continuing on my computer. And it were like 75 symptoms that I had over the next years. And yeah, I got extreme eye pain. Like when I would move my eyes, I got pain behind my eyes, and I started seeing the typical floaters that a lot of Floxies experience. And when I would try to sleep, I had those lightning flashes in front of my eyes. And I felt like I had electricity running through my body, and I had chest pain. I had panic attacks. I had severe panic attacks and paranoia. And I remember in March, I couldn't sleep at all before 5 a.m. in the morning. Like I was laying in bed and I felt like I felt the worst I ever felt in my life by far, and I couldn't sleep at all. I get it. I got fatigue and I lost the feelings on my limbs and arms. They would constantly fall asleep. Like I would fall asleep eventually and then wake up and I couldn't move my arms and my legs anymore. That was a very overwhelming and traumatic time for me and my family too. So eventually my steps went down to 1,000 or under 1,000 steps a day. And I was pretty much spending most of the time in bed. And considering what I had done the year before, I was skiing for a week. I was surfing in Portugal for a week. I was traveling, Europe with my friends. I was partying. I had just had a normal life. And then the next year after I took the antibiotic, I'm just pretty much bedridden and in bed for months on end. Yeah, that was pretty significant. And yeah, then eventually I found out about this Floxy doctor in Germany. His name is Dr. Pieper, and he's in Konstanz in the very south of Germany. And I think by now he's treated 500 to 600 Floxies. And they come from all over Europe to him. And I remember it was a 3-hour drive by car that we had to take to get there. And it was an insane challenge for me. I almost couldn't do it. And I felt terrible just sitting in the car for that long. And I just had to lay in the hotel bed for the rest of the day after doing the car drive. And then I went to him, and he was the first doctor to acknowledge my side effects. And he believed me. He was the first one who believed me, believed the full extent of everything that I experienced, because all the other hundreds of Floxies were telling him exactly the same. So that was a very good feeling to finally be acknowledged by a doctor. And then, he did some diagnostics with me. There's some mitochondrial diagnostics that we did, and he put me on a bunch of supplements. And there was the fall of 2019, and that's right around that time is when I started to get a little bit better, and some of the symptoms dissolved and improved. I think he puts those floxing side effects into 4 categories. There's first the GABA side effects, like the very beginning, what I was prescribing with the depression, with the anxiety and that dark feeling. That's when the fluoroquinolones can actually inhibit your GABA receptors in your brain. And then you're missing this important calming neurotransmitter, and your brain is pretty much going crazy and acting totally different than it was before. So that was one thing that I had experienced very severely, but that got better after roughly a year. And then the next one I also experienced was the collagen side effects, where the fluoroquinolones can upregulate those enzymes called MMPs, and they pretty much start degrading your own healthy collagen and tissue. And that's what makes your tendons hurt, and that's when you experience the tendon stiffness and everything. And that's something they still had in 2019 all through the whole year. And then also obviously the fatigue. I had severe fatigue and muscle weakness, and my muscles were twitching and were weak. And that's the mitochondria being damaged by those drugs. And I also had nerve symptoms, which is the 4th group, where I had the small fiber neuropathy, where my skin felt like it was burning, and I had weird sensations like there's water dripping over my skin, or I couldn't tell if I would put my hand in hot water and I couldn't even tell the temperature of it, or I couldn't tell it if I would touch my hands. And lost complete feeling of my arms and of my legs at one point. So yeah, throughout 2019, I was experiencing all of those side effects from all those 4 groups. Because some people only get the tendon pain, for example, and others only get the anxiety part. But it's just different for everyone.
Yeah, and I think too,
Mhm.
you guys were both young and healthy, and that was the
Yeah,
same with my daughter, Charlie and Shay. And I think how many elderly people, are prescribed this medication. I know a doctor that said, it went through a journey of trying to convince everybody like you do, because it's you want the validation, because it's so frustrating to figure it out yourself and then nobody reads the paper and understands. But this one doctor said, I prescribe it all the time, but they're all elderly people. So they wouldn't even clue in. They would go to their doctor with joint pain. And, you
Mm,
guys kind of made the connection. Dana, it took longer for you because it wasn't until it really blew up and then you look backwards. But like,
yes.
if you have it and you're healthy and young, and then all of a sudden after a medication, these things all happen, it's, and you read the literature, it's almost textbook. Like what you guys experience is exactly what our 2 kids experience. But somebody that's,
Yeah.
75, that goes in and says, I have joint pain in my muscles and my neck, and can you imagine how they're treated
Oh, yeah.
and
yeah,
what medications, additional medications they would be put on? Oh, your mother's acting depressed or anxious. Like, here you go,
Hmm.
take some more.
I don't even think it's supposed to be prescribed in the warnings to people over 65. In the black box warning. So,
Yeah, but the warnings were not followed because
mm.
the warnings were all in place when my daughter got the medication.
And she was so young.
She was 13 and she was
Yeah.
like an athlete, and pretty much everything that you both have described, she had. I didn't connect the anxiety and the insomnia, just being scared to be home alone, these things, I didn't connect that. I thought it was because she was experiencing pain and that made her scared. The way
yeah,
you
Mm-mm.
guys described it, how it affects your central nervous system and the GABA that you were mentioning, like I made that connection much later, because in the time you're just living it. And I feel bad. It's heartbreaking to hear your stories. Actually, it brings me almost to tears because I protected Charlie. She didn't read the information about the people being in wheelchairs and this, to have to read it and realize that's actually happening to you and then try and fight to get care. It's so awful. And I know that that is what Heather struggles with, because that's what Shay was trying to do, is convince his doctors that this drug had done this, you know, while you're sick, while you're experiencing
Hmm.
these symptoms.
yeah,
That's devastating, but it's just so frustrating. And I think these stories kind of just pull back the veil and allow us to see how easy it is, like discussing elderly people who might get this and have these effects. Someone younger, like you, how easy it is to get into a health system in which the treatment actually, you're having an adverse reaction to a drug, you're having a toxic reaction. Um, and then what's supposed to be what the medical establishment believes is your issue or your diagnosis. In many cases, it was in my family, the treatment killed my son in both respects. And first, getting the high dose of Levaquin for a preventative measure over a long period of time. They wanted him to take it 40 days. They
Oh
gave
my
him two
God.
21-day prescriptions, 750 milligrams a
wow,
day. We know he took it 20 days.
20 days.
Um, but he kept saying it was messing with his mind. He was a walking zombie, but he also just had a surgery that he never had before. He never had surgery before, and a nasal deviated septum. It's a violent surgery. I mean, they need to break your nose. So,
yeah,
we're just thinking it's a reaction, to just the trauma of having surgery. And the medical institutions make you believe that it's all these other things, but primarily what was really pushed in our circumstances is this whole idea of an underlying illness. He has it's an underlying mental health issue. He's at the age where that would present, that's it. It's not from this drug when it's so clear. I mean, even I know both for Lee and Fadi and Dana, this occurred after the labeling. At least you had the labeling on the box, in the States anyways, where you could say, and I know Europe is at that point too. But even though the labeling wasn't as comprehensive as it is now in regard to these issues being irreversible or ongoing after you stop the drug, there was so many testimonials. People have written books about this going back 20 years, and it's so unfortunate because I think we hit on something so important. There's so many people suffering from this and are being treated for some misdiagnosed ailment that they don't have, you know? And unfortunately, 9 times out of 10, I don't even think it'd be a stretch to say 10 times out of 10, the treatment will certainly lead to the worsening of this and a host of other effects, or the treatment kills somebody, and it's just like, this is so frustrating. Just so frustrating. And the other thing about it that's so insidious about it is some people never know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They never even know this was the issue. This is not rare. People don't know. People are being told it's this or it's that. It has nothing to do with that drug. That's what makes it rare. What's rare is somebody in the a health provider actually acknowledging and listening to someone. That's what's rare,
Yeah.
not the instance of these reactions.
And the reporting of it, as we've discussed in other podcasts, the reporting of it.
Yeah.
I'm curious with both of you, and I know that you're not, you'll tell us how you're feeling today. And a lot of people say that they don't completely heal. Like I would say my daughter, it's definitely not 100%. But what was it that you think worked to make you, to improve? What was there something that you did that helped? And we're not giving
Yeah.
medical advice on this.
Yeah.
We're just,
No,
we
yeah.
like to share what worked for you might not be for everybody. I know for us, a lot of it was with Charlie because of the gastrointestinal issues. It was a lot of like really clean eating. Like until now, she doesn't eat non-organic meat just because of the risk of the antibiotic being in the meat. But it was a healing through food a lot with us. But I'm just curious what worked for each of you.
I guess I don't know what to pinpoint it to exactly. I think it was in June of 2020. If there's anything I've learned, I mean, I've learned a lot through this entire thing, but it's just how insanely powerful our bodies are. Our body's constantly working to repair itself. And, there's things you can do to assist it. But as we know, and you guys know with this, there's no one thing that can help. But I know it's different for everyone. I just started noticing in June of 2020 that I was able to stand a little bit longer. I could stand for 30 seconds at a time, and then a minute at a time, then 5 minutes. And then I started taking steps, and I was able to leave the bedroom. I remember the first time I went out and felt the sun on my skin in, almost 4 years. And it was just the most amazing feeling just to be outside again, breathing fresh air. And I feel like that once I got that momentum, like, okay, my body can do this, it can get better. I just was able to do a little more and more from there each day, even though I still I still hadn't left the house yet. I didn't even leave the house or go somewhere else until this past May. So it hasn't even been that long since I've been back out experiencing life again, I guess. But I think what I can say helped is just, getting lots of sunlight. I was only eating a certain amount of foods because I have a very restricted, limited diet. So just eating as best as I could, I'm sure helped. And then I met Ferdi. um,
I love this.
I
Why don't you guys talk about that a little bit? And that might be a good lead in about how you two met, because you were, across the world from each
yeah,
other.
I had been off social media for years. I couldn't handle it. It was too hard for me to see pictures and stuff of people just living and enjoying their lives. I stayed off of it. And then in September of 2020, I wanted to create an Instagram account to share my floxing experience, because I saw there was a large group, a community on there, people who had been affected by these drugs. And
Mhm.
so I just created a Instagram account, and then we don't know who started following who, I think, but then he ended up just sending me a personal message on Instagram that was very nice, and said, "I'm so sorry to hear what happened to you," and just shared a little bit about what had happened to him. And then
Yeah, I mean, I felt the need to talk to people who can relate too, and I was fine. Instagram had a small community of floxies at the time,
Mhm.
and that's how we connected. And I think we started off talking about floxing mainly and comparing what we've been through and what we experienced and what had helped us. And then we also found out that we're both into music, and that was like the number two topic that immediately came after that. And we started talking about music a lot, and that's how we first connected and started talking back in 2020. Yeah.
So you're a
and
musician also, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
mhm.
No, I was just going to say that's probably really an important piece of this, though, because so often it frustrates me there's not more research, because I have met so many people who've experienced what Charlie, after Shay's death, what Charlie went through, what you two have gone through. You're so articulate. You're so in tune and aware of what's going on in your body. Shay was that also. He knew. If there was just some research, I mean, this is all important information where there could be more research going on to see what can or can't help people in this situation. But I would assume having this community, and that's something Shay never had. But you also discuss, well, I've tried this, or this didn't work. That's a huge part, because a large part of this, it appears to me, when things go really south, is when there is the presence of treatment, but not for the underlying condition, not for the toxic reaction you're having to the drug, but for whatever it's contributed to in terms of a medication or a treatment from a health provider, outside of that, whether it's a mental health issue or what, those seem to be the situations where things really get horrific quickly. But I would think that would just be so, I mean, I think that could have saved my son's life if he had this type of community to chat
It's
with.
so important. It's so
Yeah.
important because, and that was a huge thing with him. I mean, we were just talking as friends and people who had both suffered from this reaction. And I mean, he was so helpful, the stuff he was suggesting to me. And I just felt like you knew so much about it, just, much more than I had known at the time. And he was always offering things to help. And that was so helpful. And just, kind of supporting each
Mhm.
other. And you need that support when you're going through. And just to have that support from somebody who knows what you're experiencing is, that was so
Mhm.
important.
Yeah.
I think that's so valuable. I think it because so many of them people that have been harmed by these medications haven't been validated often by their families. It sounds like you both
Yes.
have very
Yes.
Yes.
supportive
Yes.
families, but you hear those stories where, I know one girl, you may know of her, who's not with us today, but she struggled. Your own family members don't believe what's going on. Am I making these conditions up about my daughter? Like, am I over exaggerating? Like, who wants their kid to be sick?
Yeah.
Who wants to be sick? But to find a community it validates that this is actually a real thing and it's really happening, and also to share like what has helped. And that's sort of been my mission, is anytime I see somebody on the Facebooks or the Instagram that's reaching out with like, what can I do, like I'm very quick to help as much as I can. This is what worked, or just to support those people. Like, it is a real thing. What you're experiencing is real,
it's so important. I think actually it's something that I don't even think people going through this, realize how important that is sometimes.
Yeah.
And we've both been so lucky because our families have been, I mean, I never would have gotten through it if I wasn't able to stay with my family and they were supporting me. And, but I just think, having that, and then when eventually in December of last year, he felt he was well enough to get on a plane and come to the United States for the first time, which was a huge
We
deal.
all follow
because
you on
he,
Instagram. We're like living through you. Yes.
That was huge. I mean, neither of us can still take that many steps. So, he was able to use the airline assistance, which took him through the whole airport. And
yeah, even in December of 21, my radius was still very small. I, was able to go out of the house a couple times a week, maybe do a couple small things, visit my grandma, for example. But I hadn't done much more than that besides visiting, doctors and like Dr. Pieper, for example. So flying to you was a huge step for me, and I was very scared of it. But luckily, there's something called the just airport assistance that takes you on the wheelchair. That, my biggest problem too is with taking many steps, and so that helped with that a lot. And then I just went on the plane and somehow made it, and that was such an accomplished feeling. And after that, I feel like I was able to fly to the US, and then what else? I mean, I can do anything now, pretty much. And it was such a good opportunity to get some trust back into my body, because you're on the airplane in the middle of the ocean. You feel like no one can help you now. You just need to get over it yourself after all those years where you just lost all the trust in your body.
Yeah.
But once I landed there, I regained a lot of it, and that was very helpful too in that sense.
Yeah. And then he, I still hadn't left the house at this point. So he started encouraging me and taking me on just little drives where I would get my parents live in this like little cul-de-sac type thing. And he started encouraging me to sit in the car and let's just go like around the small circle, let's just practice getting in the car. And, we did that the whole time he was visiting, and I started to get more comfortable trying to do stuff like that again. And I felt my body getting stronger, my legs getting stronger. And then he ended up coming back to visit again, this last May. And, I had practiced a lot with the vagus nerve stimulation, which I feel helped me, just stimulating your vagus nerve, which, controls so many bodily functions. I feel it was helping my breathing. And he had tried the Parasim device, which is something that they don't have in the US. We can't get it here. And he brought it, and I started using it when he got here in May, and I started noticing I was improving. Just this last May, I was able to go to my sister's house and see her house. I had never seen her house. She lived there for 2 years.
What is that device? I'm not familiar. Can you talk a little bit about that? Or
yeah, it's a little medical device. It's only available in Europe. I think the FDA didn't approve that yet. And you clip it on your tragus, that's here at the ear, and it sends electrical stimulation to your ear. And actually, behind the ear, there's a branch of the vagus nerve that goes through your whole body, and is important for your organ function and for your whole nervous system, for your parasympathetic nervous system. And with that device that's attached to the vagus nerve, you can actually stimulate it and make it function better. And there's actually a paper on it talking about how floxies might have vagus nerve dysfunction. And the paper,
we should post that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Give us that.
Yeah, and the paper suggests that that might be something that Fluxies could benefit from, and that's why I got it, and I felt like it helped me too in ways. I didn't see a crazy improvement after it, but I feel like it calmed me down and it made me feel a little bit better and got me into the parasympathetic state, which I still struggle to get into a little bit. And you're able to support that function with the vagus nerve stimulation. And
I noticed from using it just for a few weeks that I was able to go and do things. I was able to go to the city and we went and visited there. And then, when he was here, I never felt like I would be well enough anytime in the future to be able to come here to Europe and visit here. So just the fact that I'm sitting here right now and was able to, I use the airline assistance also and was able to get on a plane and fly here has been miraculous. And I never imagined I'd be able to do something like this.
That's wonderful. Yeah.
So wonderful.
And that makes sense with that device, because what we see, especially on the labeling, and I know we fought, and Dr. Bennett, who'll be a guest on this podcast, but I know he's been real persistent with the citizens' petitions to the FDA in regard to, right now the labeling talks about central nervous system, damage, but a lot of times that doesn't strike someone has the neuropsychiatric issues that the panic and the anxiety, which Chloe, we talked with Dr. Healy about akathisia, which can be induced by different medications. And I like the way we try to be polite about it and call it an adverse effect. He said something in his podcast that you were poisoned. You were poisoned. You know what I mean? This is a poisoning. When he would talk about my son, he was one of my son's experts in the court case. Is that this was and that really puts it in perspective. It kind of takes out all these responses of how rare it is, or just it's so uncommon that can't be it.
It's
has
just
an
not that
adverse
rare.
effect. Yeah. It's like you've lived it. And I'm just so grateful that you could share your story. I want to ask you about something. I know with Shay was a musician too.
Yeah.
And his death, when I talk about it, it was tragic, but it was a slow walk. And I think both of you and Lee having gone through this yourselves or with a family member, can kind of imagine what it would be like to not have anyone to validate this, and then be given further drugs and be given a label of being mentally ill. So it was a very slow walk to his death. He became very much different, and in the end, somewhat empty, because his struggling with this was horrific. But I can say, when he was making music, those were the few times during those 2 years where I had him back. And it might even be, just for 2 or 3 minutes, but hey, Mom, can you listen? I just made this beat. Can you listen to it? And he was there.
That's so
He was
great.
so there. So I know you two are both musicians. I just have to imagine that was helpful to both of you, to have that connection also, and to be able to produce that type of creativity together while you're coping with this was probably just phenomenal.
It really was. And it was a struggle for me. I think just losing my ability to sing, because that was always one of my favorite things to do. And I wasn't able to do that for a while. And then, we started just recording songs back and forth to each other across the ocean. And I was doing, I would just be singing just little tiny pieces at a time to record. And I would just be in bed sometimes just doing that. But it was just so motivating and helpful just to always be able to have that part of it, And how much you love music. I think just listening to music, playing music, just getting strong enough again to play and sing. And it's just been a great thing.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I remember in 2019, I also struggled playing the guitar because my fingers were just not moving the way they used to, and they were stiff, and I couldn't really control them. And when eventually that started getting better, it was the best thing in the world. It was like the best supplement for me, if you will, to play music and play guitar. And has always been a huge part of my healing, and even just listening to music. When I would feel terrible and anxious, and then I had my songs and I would put them on, and they would immediately make me feel better than pretty much any supplement in the world, I would even say. So it's always been a big part for me too, and then just doing it with you has been like a very amazing experience, honestly.
I feel the same way.
I see big things for you too. I
Yeah.
really do.
That's so great. It's so wonderful that you guys have had this horrific, life-changing experience, but at least have connected over it and have each other's support and the music that you make together. And not that you would trade what had happened, but at least it has brought this wonderful relationship.
Yeah, we say that too. I mean, as terrible as it has been, we never would have met if this didn't happen.
Yeah.
For sure, never.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think what's important for all of us to remember too, I don't have Shay with me anymore, but now what I could do is tell this story. And I know this story, Lee was in contact with me very soon after, her daughter had this happen to her, and it diverted this whole entry into, mental health, other medications that could have certainly sent her down a path that no one should have to go down to, and which is fatal. So I just, for you two, this is wonderful. And I hope that in sharing these stories, there's hope, because
Yeah.
I really think one of the things, when there's no hope, that's when you kind of give up, and that's when you hear these stories like mine, and got to speak out. We got to say, even if people don't want to hear it. I don't know how many times people have rolled their eyes, what, I don't care, because one person could hear it.
Yeah, it means a lot to us that you guys are doing this, and
Yeah.
getting the word out and helping a lot of people, and just I know I feel very thankful for that, and just what you guys are doing. And
Me too.
Mhm.
It's very important. And
Well, we're just so appreciative
yeah.
of both of you for sharing your experiences. It's probably painful to talk about it and relive about the worst days, and you're still on your healing journey. You're not back to where you hope to be, and hopefully that journey continues for you. But we're really grateful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I feel very happy, and even if there's still certain things that neither of us can do. We can't play physical sports or do, but sometimes it's just nice to, we're lucky to have our families, and lucky to, they drive us places and drop us off,
Yeah.
and
All the time.
yeah, just doing little things like that. And even if it's not where we were at one point, I don't doubt that either of us can get back to that and continue to improve. So
And there's so much we learned along the way too that we never would have learned, or we wouldn't have grown in a way if we wouldn't have experienced that. So it's also that side to see.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I just know your story is going to be an inspiration.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's, Heather and I, just on a final note, like with our
Yeah.
podcast saying, be your own expert. Like, I think we can all say what we've learned is question everything that we put in or on our body, because you can't just take it because it's prescribed. You can't just continue to take it even when you're having side effects because you were told to not stop. Like, we realize we need to be aware, and we need to research. And you guys are so both intelligent, and I'm just impressed with what you've learned about this medication and the side effects and what's happened. And and I know both of you and us too, and are going to be that much more careful with everything that we continue to take.
Mm-hmm. And it's, you know,
weighing the risk and benefit at all times, really.
Yeah. And there's just, you know, there's more and more research and more studies that are being done to learn more about it, and more communities out there for, you know, what he's doing now. He's helping other floxies. They're doing coaching and
wonderful.
just helping.
Oh, wow.
He's part of
Can you talk about that a little bit?
I can talk about it real quick.
That's wonderful. I didn't know that.
There's this homepage called FQ Consulting, and it was founded by a Swiss medical student who himself had also gotten floxed, and he's about to get his medical degree very soon. So he's at the very end of his studies, and he was coaching me. He opened this site where he would offer help for floxies, and he was talking to me in 2020, in 2021, and then I got a lot of help from him. He knew so much about it, and it was amazing to have him to talk to, and he got me through this like to a great extent. And then eventually he asked me if I wanted to be part of his homepage too, if I wanted to talk to people and help people in the way he did with me. And I obviously said yes. I did this online course on IIN to become a health coach last year, and now I'm part of his page too, and we're offering one-on-one consulting for floxings where we're trying to help them. And we're offering a free monthly support group for people, so far only in German, but where people can, you know, connect with each other, support each other, and just we're trying to create a space where people can talk about their experiences without being judged and where they're understood. We're also planning on doing an English one for our American and British friends. And Marco will also host mindfulness courses there to help with stress management and pain management. And we also founded this Instagram site for the homepage where we're trying to raise awareness and, you know, educate people on the side effects and just spread the word and help people that need the help, because there's not a lot of places where people can go to get help.
We'll have to put all that on our website, because we're getting a lot of, I know Lee can attest to this too, but people are emailing us with questions. It would be nice to be able to give them a resource such as that.
Yeah, they have the free support groups for anyone that wants to join, and just if they don't have the family support or the community, just where they can connect with other people.
This gives me a lot of hope, though, because I know Lee's daughter is in medical school. Charlie, they're in Australia, so maybe we won't change this system right now, but it's coming. And with organized groups like Patty and Dana giving this outreach, I mean, this is what it's going to take. It's just really going to take getting out there, in Charlie's case, infiltrating it. She'll be, I have no doubt she'll be a doctor who will listen.
That's so great.
Well, this was just a wonderful chat. I thank you two so much for being with us.
Yeah.
Thank you
guys.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you
for having us. Mm-hmm. Thank you for doing what you're doing to help all of us. And
we're trying.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today on this episode of No Risk. And remember, being your own expert is the best way to prevent yourself or your loved one from being harmed.
And please join us for future podcasts and help support us by subscribing, providing some feedback, and of course, giving us a 5-star rating. You can also follow us on Facebook and Instagram at No Risks, and check us out on our website at norisks.org, where you can read our stories, suggest future topics, and share your stories.